Welcome to the Sports Science Dudes. I am your host, Dr. Jose Antonio, with my inimitable co-host, Dr. Anthony Ricci. If you are a first-time listener, hit the subscribe button and like the show. We're on YouTube, and you also could find us on Spotify. Today, our special guest is Mindset Mike from Wrestling Mindset. To say the least, once I saw his bio, he's got one of the most diverse and interesting backgrounds. In fact, of all our guests, just some super cool stuff. Served 7 years in the FBI, certified crisis negotiator, which is really interesting. Also a Division I wrestler. We know wrestling might be the most difficult sport, although Tony would probably say boxing.
They're right there.
Neck and neck. He's a featured speaker at over 150 coaching clinics, universities, and businesses. He's been with 4 collegiate teams that won national titles, 18 high school state championships. So he's been with a lot of winners. Head wrestling coach Without Limits. Look at those rings. Very cool. At Without Limits from 2013 to 2022. He's also coached 100+ state placers and 50+ All-Americans and 9 national champions since 2013. A lot of stuff going on here with Mike. He's also recognized by ESPN, UFC Media, Joe Rogan, and he knows Ariel Helwani. So before we get to Mike, I want to make a quick plug, Tony, for the International Society Sports Nutrition Conference. It will be at Fort Lauderdale Beach, June 15 to 17. Make sure you register at issn.net. That is issn.net. And let's welcome Mindset Mike to the show. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. It's funny, Tony, I knew you before you knew me because I know Corey.
So, okay. All right. Yes.
Yeah. So like the first place, there's a couple of places where I made my name, MMA being one. The first gym that I spent time around was Hard Knocks, now Sanford.
Yep.
Very cool.
So,
right up. I'm literally 5 miles from there, Mike. Yeah.
What is it? What's the university? Nova?
We're all Nova guys. That goes for Dr. P, Corey, Jose, and myself. So you got to get out there one day soon again with us.
I know. I need to, and that conference, let's definitely talk offline. I'd love to find out more because there's a lot of people in the community where, like, again, I knew about you guys and the stuff you were doing before you guys ever knew about me. So I got to be a fan first and kind of follow all the science and worked with fighters that you guys have worked with and see the science. I picked Corey's brain a lot. So really cool to be here for me. You probably didn't even realize that going in, but this is fun for me because when I first got my start in higher profile fighting, when I looked at sports science, you guys were who I looked to. So appreciate the opportunity to be here.
We appreciate that. We have so much. Okay, we looked at your bio. Fantastic. So it's a long journey too to go from where you started, Lindbrook Wrestling. I'll have everyone tell you about, you can tell everyone about that. And just tell us how this culminated, Mike. So how your interest in sport, where it moved to, then how we got to the FBI and just a little overview of your journey to where you are now, because boy, it's impressive.
Thanks. There's one statistic you missed. That's probably my favorite. And in the last 3 years, I've had 14 people beat #1 in the country or the world.
Wow. Very nice.
That's probably my favorite statistic, but I don't take any of the credit for that. I feel like what I do as a coach, as a mindset coach, is I give them the skills and tools and processes for them to unlock that last 5% that hard work and determination just doesn't. So we'll get into details, but I think, there's a specific set of things that beyond your traditional mindset coaching, proprietary to what I do, that I think really helps people find a very special, unique frame of mind for their performance. So how did I get here? I'm a wrestler through and through. I played all kinds of sports. I grew up on Long Island, Strong Island.
Strong Island, everyone. Remember that.
Strong Island. So I feel like Long Island very much built me. I think, Tony, you could probably agree. Chris Wade is a former UFC fighter, PFL guy from Long Island. And he
know him well.
Asked, great guy. And Chris was asked, why does Long Island put out so many good fighters? And they said, he's like, you got to realize the population of Long Island is like bigger than most states. The amount of competition just to like get a girlfriend, get a good grade, score touchdowns in recess. Like it's a lot. And not only is the size amount of competition, but it's the attitude. It's always about like who's tougher, who's better, everything was a competition from when you were a kid. So I appreciate Long Island. So I grew up wrestling my whole life. That was my primary sport. I wrestled Division I in college on a top 10 team. I wrestled at University of Maryland when we were top 25. Sure. Unfortunately, I was played by Terps. I was played by a lot of injuries, so I didn't get to wrestle as much as I wanted to. But I watched the transformation from a bottom 3 program in the ACC to a top 10 program in the country. A lot of what I learned, not just on the technical side, but on the culture building side, what I watched my coaches do was something that was very impactful for me when I opened up my own wrestling club, and then now I get to coach world-class athletes. So fast forward, 6 months out of college, I was in the FBI. So my primary job was national security surveillance. So I followed bad guys around. I went to ghosting school. Wow. It was pretty fun. Yeah.
Wait, you went to ghosting school? Say that again.
Ghosting school was the slang term we called it. How to disappear in plain sight.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. So well, I could follow you around all day with a team of my peers, and you would have no idea.
Interesting.
Think of what you do on a daily basis. More so not at work, but on a weekend. How much you do on a daily basis. Saw it all, recorded it all, and was there with you the whole time. You just didn't know it.
Wow. Neat stuff.
It was pretty cool. So I did that. And then, similar to my experience in college, I felt like my criminology and psychology degree was like what you make of it. It could be a cookie cutter degree, or you could take really cool things and really invest in it. So that's what I did when I was at the FBI. I had over $100,000 worth of training that I took in addition to like the requirements for my position. So I was a certified behavioral science researcher, a certified crisis, or most people layman terms, a hostage negotiator. I was able to serve on a lot of really great missions and with a lot of really great people. I got to learn a lot, be a part of a lot. So 22 years old, I was the youngest person in the Washington, D.C. Field office. And my boss, funny story, he called me new guy. And that's cool when you're the new guy. He called me new guy for like 2.5 years.
Oh God.
So my code name was Pre, short for Prefontaine. I'm sure you know the story, right?
Cool.
The runner. Yeah, he was my inspiration as an athlete. I definitely appreciated like some of the people in the wrestling community, but as an athlete, Steve Prefontaine was like my. You want to talk about who influenced my mindset movement? Anyone else? It's Steve Prefontaine.
He was badass. Total badass.
Yep. Total badass. Like that guy should have wrestled.
Yeah.
That guy should have wrestled. You know what I mean? And so long story short, I was in the FBI and I took a transfer to Houston, opened up a wrestling academy. In the first year of the kids at my club, we had 13 kids in the state finals. 9 should have won, 5 kind of shit the bed. And I was a D1 athlete on a top 10 team. I had great coaches my whole life. I took a lot of psychology courses in college. I was sports psych I was passionate about. I felt like I gave really great advice. Technically, mentally, they were very well prepared. They just didn't show up. It's like they didn't clock in for work for that match. And as a coach, club coach, you get paid to win. Like, call it however you want it. Parents are paying you to win. Yes, you're a mentor. Yes, you're teaching life skills. You go to a club and extra practice, they're paying you because they want your kid to win. They choose you for the mentorship. They choose you for your skills. Point is, I'm like, how can I run a sustainable business when I can give kids all the skills? And like, it's just Russian roulette when we get there.
Right.
And so I sought out resources in 2014, 2013 for my kids. And that's where I found Wrestling Mindset, the company that I work with today. So I'm one of the directors in the company now, but I started off hiring them to work with my club team because my kids were this good, but this is what happened. This is what they knew, but this is what showed up. Exactly. And I'm like, I told them what to do. I showed them what to do. So much time, effort, and energy. They just didn't perform. And I was like, I can't close that gap. And I'm not going to roll the dice every year. Like I took time away from me. Selfishly, I'm saying time away from my family, my hobbies. Like I poured into those kids. And to no fault of their own, they just didn't show up. So, for them, I wanted to be able, as a coach, provide like a holistic approach to training. I wanted to be a one-stop shop. And then on a business end, like I needed an insurance policy that all the stuff that I'm doing is going to show up. So we used the programming. It was incredibly helpful. I really understood it. I was passionate about it. I was one of the original 7 coaches that they trained in the company. We now have over 100.
Wow, fantastic.
Yeah, we work with about 4,000 to 5,000 athletes a year now. So 2016, 2015, they were begging me to leave my job at the FBI. And I'm like, you're crazy. I'm not leaving that job for a startup, somebody else's startup, mind you.
Right.
They ultimately like things allowed me, like the opportunity was created for me to where like I loved what I did. I was proud of what I was doing at the FBI, but I was no longer passionate about it. My passion every day, I woke up and thought about this job. And, one of the reasons I chose the FBI was I wanted to make an impact. I was a New Yorker in school during 9/11. And I remember doing a career assessment project, like simultaneously. And with all the skill sets, a lot of the jobs were like things that involved critical thinking, analytical, investigation. And I'm like, man, I don't want to be a cop, but I don't know what I want to do. And then second period chemistry happens. And I see Robert Mueller walking through with Rudy Giuliani and Ground Zero. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to prevent that from ever happening again.
Awesome. Yeah.
So, yeah, man. So I lived the rest of my life squeaky clean so that I can make sure that I was able to get in the FBI. And I'll tell you a quick story about how I got in. So I got, my first time I interviewed was through my university. I didn't get the job. I was very fortunate to get another interview about 6 to 12 months later. And I'm in the interview room. And of the 4 people in the waiting room was a doctor, a lawyer, a rocket scientist, and a detective. And I'm like, how do I compare to that? And, I'm like, I'm 22. Like my resume is good, but shit, that's like, I'm a JV wrestler and they're 4-time state champs. But I tell that example a lot because people look at records and rankings of their opponents a lot, how good their opponent is. I'm like, if I looked at how good my opponent was, I would have walked right out the door.
Right.
That was not even Rocky Balboa. That would be like Mick from Rocky fighting Ivan Drago.
So mindset is starting right there at 22, though. I mean, I know you already had it in wrestling, but you got to get yourself together when you're in a crowd like that.
So wrestling casually taught me skills that allowed me to perform in that moment. Fast forward to mindset training as a profession and as a, what started as personal development, Tony Robbins, stuff like that, has now transformed into, sports science like you guys have, except for us on the mental performance side. It's a very lucrative, but also it's a very necessary business.
Absolutely.
Especially at the highest levels that we all work at, right? So wrestling casually taught me those skills. Mental performance coaches that have a systematic process, we intentionally teach you those skills instead of hoping that sports casually give them to you over time.
Fantastic journey, Mike. I mean, it's really neat to see how wrestling develops you. You know the importance of mindset as a kid. I think it's a really big deal to walk into that room, right? You talk about some resiliency, calming yourself down when you're 22 years of age with some top guns in that room and being able to regather yourself.
Late to my interview, by the way. I was also late to my interview, by the way, because the cab didn't show up. So I had to run from my house because the cab didn't show up.
Testing sports psychology 101, right?
Did you walk in huffing and puffing and sweaty?
I calmed myself down beforehand. But before I ever taught this specific concept is what won me that interview. I was way more excited for the opportunity to interview for my dream job than I was worried about messing it up. I recognized that this was a once in a lifetime opportunity that I may never, ever get again. So instead of looking at how good my opponents were, I focused on how good my resume was. And I was like, only thing that I can do is interview my ass off. I was like, there's no way any of these people are more charismatic than me that are going to have a better interview than me. I practiced for this. I got mentored for this. I'm like, to swing for the fences, and we'll just see what happens at the end of the thing. So I walked into that interview, not please give me a chance. I walked into that interview, no lie, you would be crazy not to hire me because.
Fantastic. That's, again, at 22 years old, that's a mindset ahead of its time. That takes years to establish, obviously, in professional athletes. Just a quick note, and then we're going to, we'll go on to really what you do and the focus on and, the emphasis in your mental skill training. But I really can't agree with you anymore. What got me into, what happens is you go to school as a young kid, you go in, exercise physiology, physical education, and then great. And then you do some strength training, and then you realize you know nothing about nutrition. So now I got to go back to school, right? Yeah. Then I got to go back. Oh, well, I don't know sports science. I do a master's in that. But what happened, and obviously names will be left out, but I'm going back to a world title fight, UFC. Oh, maybe where are we? 2023, about 12 years ago. And we had an exceptional camp with the individual. To your point, just like your wrestlers are on the mat and they're crushing it. Great camp. By every measurable marker, we crushed it. Skill acquisition. I mean, the devices for measuring heart rate, HRV, were not as advanced as they are now. But we looked at trends. We looked at it anyway. Sleep went well. Everything was spot on. Like, we couldn't have been any happier with the camp. Skill coach was really ecstatic, and I watched almost every sparring session. 3 minutes into the fight, I'm getting text messages. Why didn't you do any cardio? Why didn't he work on this? Why has he got his left hand in his pocket? I mean, it looked like that particular day, and there were a host of things that were wrong just a few weeks prior mentally. But nevertheless, it took all that work, as you noted. And the psychophysiology is so strong that the capacity to almost erase an elite level of skill within hours, it's gone, right? Absolutely gone. So I understand where, and then what did I do? I had to go back again and get another doctorate degree in sports psychology because I knew nothing about it, right? But nevertheless, that's why I'm so, excited about what you do. And you could lead into, if you would like, just, you said top strategies that you utilize, and maybe give our listeners some idea on what the practice and what your profession entails first.
And actually, so, Mike, a quick sidebar. Our guest on our last podcast. She holds the Guinness World Record for paddling from Cuba to Florida, and. Yeah. So, and it took her 27 hours, 40 something minutes. It was like 115 miles. And it dovetails perfectly with what you're talking about, because she goes, most of this is actually in your head. I mean, exactly. She goes, physically, I know I can do it. It'll be brutal as hell. But if my brain quits, then I quit. And I just can't let my brain quit. So this actually, just like what Tony explained with the fighter, who his brain quit for whatever reason. So, comment on your experiences with this.
Sure. So first of all, what percentage of sports, particularly combat sports, do you feel like are mental versus physical?
What percent? I would guess all of them would have a huge mental component.
A percentage?
Huge, right? So percentage.
A percentage. So I mean, it depends where they are in their career, and I think it can evolve. I mean, if it's the first time in the UFC, man, I got to go 70%.
So let's say it's at least at a minimum 50-50, if not 70-30. Point is, it's a lot. Now, think of how intentional you are with how you train your athletes, how intentional you are, the way that the exercises they do, how you assess and evaluate, and how you continually refresh and renew what the processes they're doing. How intentional are we with our mental training? Because if sports are going to say 70% mental, why do we train 150% physically?
Exactly.
We talk about mindset. We listen to podcasts on mindset, right? We read books on mindset, but you don't listen to podcasts and read books on how to be a better striker. You go to striking class.
Great point.
You don't talk about lifting.
Great point.
About lifting, you lift. So that's the gap in performance. So that performance gap is seen in three ways. Average athletes or below average athletes can use mindset training to get to the next level and overcome some of their mental blocks, right? Above average athlete, maybe they have some mental blocks, but it's more so like, how can I close the gap on top level people, right? And then now let's talk about the elite athletes that we get the privilege of working with a lot. Top tier, like, I got to work with 2 UFC champions last year, people that are winning NCAA championships behind me, like top level. How do I widen the gap between myself and other people? So mental edge at the top 10%, some of them, 9% of them are closing the gap on the 1%. The 1%ers is how do I separate myself? Because I can't take steroids anymore. Right. So, when you can't take steroids anymore and everyone at the high level is great coaching, great sports science behind what they do, that's where we can come in. So, some of the techniques, I want you to think of it in a couple layers, right? So overall, there's lots of physical skills for striking, for grappling, and for strength and endurance, right? There's lots of core skills. So for mindset, there's also, mental skills, right? We call those mental muscles. So relaxing under pressure, self-knowledge, confidence, aggressiveness, staying in the moment. Yeah. Those are skills that must be intentionally taught, right? Beyond the skills, there's some things that I feel like through a lot of travel, through a lot of experience working with high performers, where I feel like concepts and strategies that help unlock that last little bit. So I got to give credit where credit's due. The team and group that I've probably spent a lot of time studying is Penn State's wrestling team. Okay. Mm-hmm. They won 9 out of 11 in a row.
Kale Sanderson, right? That's
45-5 in the national championship semifinals. 9 for 9 in the last 2 years. Unheard of. They're the team of the decade, right? They believe the mental edge of their team is gratitude. Sounds really cute, like a great Instagram or YouTube video. Right. What is the reason behind it, right? Those guys, when you describe them competing, man, they're having a lot of fun. Like they're relaxed. They're scoring a lot of points, taking a lot of chances. Versus you think of wrestling as a whole, you think of like super serious, intense, right? Like almost borderline, like angry all the time. Penn State guys are like watching, enjoying, so different. First of all, they're one of the only teams in the country with a mindset coach on staff. This lady who is quite old, complete head of white hair, meaning I'm saying she's she got to be in her 70s. She is not young. He was Kale's coach, mindset coach during the Olympics. He only works with Penn State wrestling. And, as I'm like digging, I became friends with the family, really close friends with the youngest brother, Kyler. I did camps with Kale and his family. I spent time with mom and dad, spent time with the athletes, and gratitude. Okay, but why? Why does gratitude? Well, whole conversation for another day, but to keep it simple, gratitude and stress do not coexist chemically in the brain, right? So the hormones that are around gratitude are the antidote and are the canceling factor to the hormones that will produce stress. So when you think of a team, or if they're going to say gratitude is their dominant attitude, their brain is full chemicals that support, when we think of dopamine, right? Dopamine's a happy hormone. Dopamine also enhances focus. Dopamine also prevents fatigue. What's the opposite of that, right? So if they're more thankful for the opportunity to compete than they are stressed about winning and losing, on the flip side, those are more stressed for winning and losing are full of cortisol. You both know what cortisol does, right? And it is a killer for performance. Cortisol can literally kill you. So I don't have to talk science to the science guys, but for the people that are listening, right? What I feel like Penn State has done by building a culture that revolves around gratitude, their default when fight or flight hit is excitement. So they are more focused on fun and excitement than they are worried about winning and losing. I can't speak from exact science perspectives, but I would imagine that there is a balance between dopamine and related hormones and cortisol in the brain. The more dopamine you have, the more resistant and less cortisol that there will be. The more cortisol you have, the more resistant that you'll have to be happy and free. So exactly. Those guys are always happy and free. They're always excited. They're always having fun. Bigger the match, the bigger the opportunity. So how can I dissect what they've done so well, casually and intentionally, and then recreate that into athletes? Our process is great. Everything I've learned working with people all over the world has been really helpful to Frankenstein, like my approach, but that's the biggest thing. When you're more excited and thankful for the opportunity to compete, you lack the capacity to be stressed about winning and losing. So the less stress that you have, the more free that you can be. The more free that you can be, the more that you can trust your training and perform or above your potential. So conceptually, without giving away all my secrets, that's the moneymaker.
Right.
Like that's the moneymaker. So, you know, the people that I've gotten to work with that have done the things they're not supposed to do, those are the people that what I call have weaponized gratitude. Gratitude is not just being thankful. Gratitude is reframing the way that they operate as humans in and out of the cage, on and off the mat, on and off the field. So making gratitude a performance enhancing weapon. So when you can do that, that's stronger than any steroid that you can ever do, because these people, like, they don't get tired. On the flip side, your fighter, he gassed out. He was in great shape. Why did he gas out? His body got full of lactic acid. Why? Stressed as hell. Why? Couldn't manage his emotions and his mind.
Exactly.
Why? He was more focused on winning and losing that he has no control over versus being excited for the opportunity to compete for a UFC title.
Okay, just quickly, and I'll let Joey get to a question, and because what came out, what you shared with us is brilliant. And now I know a little bit about and studied, thanks to Dr. Antonio and Dr. Tartar, the neurobiology of flow state, and you're hitting it. But gratitude is used in everything but sport. It's used in, right? I mean, if you want, it's part of Buddhism. It's part of mindfulness. It's part of meditation. It's part of a regulating emotion. But that is brilliant, because we don't hear that. As, of course, there are other mental skills that are required, but never do I hear that as an emphasis in optimal motor skill acquisition, sport performance. And that is, as you noted, putting you in the optimal flow state, right? The right level of cortisol, catecholamines, epinephrine, norepinephrine, balanced by parasympathetic influence. And the brain, it's pretty simple. If the brain doesn't want to do something and has its doubts, well, it's certainly ain't going to let the body go anywhere without it.
Yeah.
Right.
I would love to spend some time. Like, I want to deep dive into this with you guys at some point. Like, I'd love to learn more than the surface level of like what I've been able to figure out.
Yeah, well, that surface level is pretty damn good, but we'll chat. I'll tell you right now, we'll chat more about it. But do you have a question, Joey?
No, actually, you brought up what I was thinking about, the concept of a flow state. And I was approached, this was a while back, by a group that wanted to do a study in runners, because runners oftentimes talk about a flow state where it becomes effortless. And when they run, it's not painful. The breathing seems effortless. And it's only in running that they achieve what's called a high. You don't get a cyclist high. You don't get a swimmer's high. You don't get a high in any sport other than running. And it's interesting. I spoke to an evolutionary biologist about this, and he said it might relate to the fact that humans are meant to locomote. I mean, that's one of our basic skills. You gotta run, because running, you could either get away from a predator or you're chasing prey. And that's why that's right. Exactly. And that's why you see it when people who do a repetitive activity like running, they achieve this flow state, which it's almost hard when you're in it, you're in it, but it's hard to explain to someone who's never felt it. So for instance, for people who've never exercised or competed, they have no idea what you're talking about. To them, it's a completely foreign concept.
Right.
Yeah. At a high level, the goal of a mindset coach, and I think there's a lot of misunderstandings, right? Oh, you have to be sick to want to get better. No, like it's not about fixing problems. I'm sure there is, right? And the same thing for you guys, but ultimately, like, I want to help people reverse engineer their best performance. And being a very research oriented person myself in the FBI and then in school, we collect data. I work with Northwestern University's lacrosse program. Very proud to be a part of their staff. My opinion, coach of the greatest women's lacrosse player of all time, won the Tewaaraton twice. Essentially is considered the Cale Sanderson of women's lacrosse.
Wow.
I'm not going to get into the detail, but we take data on mental performance factors every game and poll the whole team, and get from that data that allows us, like you do with data with HRV and things like that, that allows us to influence the decision making that we make over the next year. So I'm sorry, over the next game. And it has to be a data-driven, like research-oriented approach. But the bottom line is that reverse engineer a great performance. What people think about flow state, oh, remember that one fight that I did really good? What was I thinking for that one fight? What did I do? What did my camp look like? In research, that's one data point.
Right.
Like I can't get anything. I can't recreate that, but we can find the common themes and patterns. And then again, through some concepts and skills and things that we can teach, we can learn how to reverse engineer a good performance. Why does a heart surgeon very rarely have a bad day at the office? Why does Outback Steakhouse produce the same ribeye every time, no matter where you go? They follow the same recipe.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we need on mindset. And a lot of coaches, like, not to put anybody down, but a lot of people are just like hell-bent on focusing on a lot of imagery and a lot of meditation. Those things are great.
They're good. Yeah.
There's a whole set of, they're good. They're great.
Yeah.
But there's a whole set of skills that you need to develop where those things become highly effective.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Yeah. Imagery is useless if you can't regulate emotion, right? If you can't control mindset, there you go, right? Yeah.
So when you focus on the right things, it becomes hard to do the wrong ones. When you focus on the wrong things, it becomes hard to do the right ones. So Jose, you mentioned predator prey. We talk about a concept that we coined called predator mindset, right? You guys know the difference between predator and prey animals, right? How do you spot the difference?
Who's running away?
The location of their eyes.
Yeah.
Eyes in the front like to hunt, eyes on the side like to hide.
Yeah.
Right? So predator mindset, when you have a very simple, narrow vision, only focus on a very specific set of circumstances, you operate like this, right? If I'm driving a car and focus on what's in front of me and I have tools to prevent me from swerving, my eyes are in the right place. How do I get into a wreck? I don't. That's why Tesla can auto drive, right? So being able to teach people skills to have that predator mindset, where if you can maintain emotional control, then I can teach you all these things that allow you to unlock the kind of performance you're not supposed to get. I'm sure you guys have more questions, so I'm gonna say one more thing. Is do you guys follow jiu-jitsu much?
Oh yeah, all the. I mean,
Okay.
I train a lot. Yeah, so still judo, jits. Yeah.
So do you know who Gabi Garcia is?
Yeah. She's a big girl.
Big girl, like 300 pounds, roided to the gills.
Yeah.
Right.
Like big was my soft way of putting it.
Yeah. No, I've no problem. Listen, if this was a different circumstance, I probably would add a few more voice comments. But Gabi is absolutely loaded. My client was the one that kicked the crap out of her at Who's Number One last year. That since then, now she's won 1 out of her last 4. It was the biggest upset in women's jiu-jitsu history. She was like, I don't know, a couple hundred to 1 underdog, like 8 seed to the 1 seed, no business beating her, doesn't even like do jiu-jitsu full time anymore, and beat the brakes off of her. She walked off the mat and they're like, this is the biggest upset we've ever seen. Like, how did you pull this off? Like, she dominated her. And my girl weighs about 150 pounds. And she's like, and she's talked about a few things. And she's like, I've worked on my mindset a lot. Gave me a shout out and talked about, we've really spent a lot of time talking about gratitude. And I was way more excited to be here than I was worried about winning or losing. So when I got the opportunity to fight Gabi, I seized the opportunity instead of worrying about how hard she was to beat, right? And, I can go all these trophies behind there. Those 2 were from national championships in lacrosse. 2021, this team has been to the finals 3 times. They've never won. They get their butt kicked. They're facing a team that the last time they played them, they beat them, they lost by 7. They won in double overtime. Nice. The next year we make the finals. We're down by 5 in the first quarter, biggest deficit they've had in like 3 years. Come back and dominate them in the second half. Not the reason they're successful. Their ability to absorb what I'm saying and then use it in the moment is, but you saw them getting their ass kicked and never change body language, never change focus, never change energy. So, mental skills and sports science are 2 of the things that are just non-negotiable when you want to compete at a high level.
Let me ask you this, because the idea of your athlete overcoming the odds and beating Gabi Garcia. Let's look at the other end of the spectrum, the Gabi Garcias, or the Mike Tyson getting beat by Buster Douglas, or Tony, you remember this, 1980, USA hockey beat the Soviet Union. I mean, no one even knows what the Soviet Union is anymore, but
that may be the greatest underdog story in all of sport history, actually.
Right.
Sure.
There was no way the Americans should have won that hockey game. So look at the other side, Mike, and tell us, so what's happening on that side? Is there a sense of entitlement? Is it, I mean, is that what it is?
So there's a couple of things. That's probably one of the, high five to you, probably one of the best questions I've ever been asked on a podcast.
It is a good one.
It is a good one. So oftentimes it's easier to be the underdog than it is to be the one that's expected to win, right? So some people put unnecessary pressure on themselves because of those expectations, right? Like instead of showing why they earned the number one ranking, they feel like they have to protect it, right? So they introduce a lot of unnecessary stress. So that's one. Two, a lot of overlooking. Okay, a lion treats a deer the same as a tiger. You're a threat, right? Like deer, like bucks have antlers. A zebra can kick them in the head. Like they understand that I can't take anything lightly in the animal kingdom. So I'm going to shred you just like I'm going to shred him. The lion is no different than the zebra. I'm going to try to kill you just the same. So what happens a lot of times is, in my opinion, right? I didn't sit down and do case studies, but being a research loving guy, I would love to, is what I observe is these really good teams that get upset. They come in a little overconfident. They probably did not perform like their life depended on it, like in practice that week, right? Posted a little bit, did enough, worked hard, came in, faced unexpected adversity, right? Pause. They overlooked their opponent. They were surprised that they were better than they were. Then they try to overcompensate. They made more mistakes. Then they get more frustrated. Then they start getting tired because they're full of cortisol, right? Then they start not performing well, and it's like they almost forget how to play, right? Why is it nowadays more than 20 years ago? I can tell you in wrestling, like in 2017, number one only faced number two twice in the finals. Only twice.
I remember reading something, right? Yeah.
Upset after upset after upset. Why is it that a 13 seed makes it? Well, again, so on the other side, they come in a little bit too confident. So the story they're telling themselves in the front of their head is they're like, man, I'm going to kill this guy. I'm going to kill this team. We're not worried about them. But all of a sudden in the back of their head, right, then when they are down a couple points or when they're better than they're expected, now they're like, oh man, well now I gotta catch up. Then they overcompensate. They make more mistakes. Now mentally they're fatiguing themselves physically.
Yep.
Right. We could talk about what really happened to Simone Biles and how she calls herself vertigo another day, but you know, that mind-body connection. But you watch people just fall apart. Let's take best example that I use a lot when Tom Brady beat the Falcons. Okay. They came in as underdogs, but then like thought the game was already over. So on the flip side, Tom Brady, they're like, man, we're trying to move the chains. And they had the greatest comeback in football history. Yep. One play, moving the chains, one play at a time. These people on the other side, they need to, like for Northwestern, we talk about having an underdog mentality always. Even if we're favored to win, we have something to prove.
Right.
The best mentality is the underdog. It's easy to be the underdog. And I get called all the time. Hey man, I hear you're the upset guy. Biggest fight of my life. How do I win? Biggest thing of my life. I had a 38-year-old win the Invicta world title recently. He was like a 5-1 underdog, choked the girl out first round, right? Like I'm the underdog guy. It's really easy to coach underdogs, right? But the reality is that like you need to teach the favorites, the better players, how to have that same underdog mentality. What makes the underdog mentality? They have nothing to lose. It's easy to play when you got nothing to lose.
Exactly.
It's hard to perform when you got everything to lose. How do you remove those burdens? When you're unburdened, you're free to be at your best. And that's what I feel like I do better than anybody else.
Right. Awesome stuff.
So the guys like, I love the sports analogy. So the guys like the Tom Bradys, the Michael Jordans, do they always have, I'm sure they don't tell themselves, hey, I'm the underdog, because oftentimes they're not the underdog, but they play as if they were. Is that sort of part of it?
I feel like, well, first of all, realize that those two greatest athletes of all time both had mindset coaches. And people think that they're just born that way. And they were good, but remember, Mike got from the JV basketball team, right? So Mike wasn't born that way. So I believe those guys, and this is another thing that I say, I'm giving away all my secrets here. The secret to success is being addicted and obsessed to improvement. When you get lost in the sauce of building gratitude and improvement, dopamine is released in anticipation of a reward. I believe dopamine, among, I'm sure, some other chemicals, but mainly dopamine is the performance enhancing chemical that you could probably find present among high levels, among the highest level of athletes. They are happy and excited to compete under adversity. They don't get stressed. They get more excited. I call that being anti-fragile. They're hard to kill. When things get hard, they get better. Yeah. So adversity excites them. Challenge excites them. So those guys, they walk in obsessed about getting better and always want to prove they're the best, right? There's almost a level of for Mike, like a level of arrogance where like, and Kobe, we're like, I'm going to show you how much better I am than you. So they definitely always play like they've got something to prove. But I think all of the greats are obsessed about getting better. And if a great player gets better every day, they become harder and harder to beat when they embrace, when they expect, embrace, and get excited by adversity, right? Then they become hard to kill. And the tougher the game gets, the better that they get. That's what separates 1%ers, is how they manage adversity.
That's brilliant. I mean, we can go on for 4 hours. We're going to have a part 2, 3, and 4 with this.
That's fine.
Yeah. So so those guys are obviously highly resilient, like you say, but they love the process too. And that's what, right?
They love the process.
Process, goal-oriented, get better. And like being challenged, even if they are favored, they enjoy the challenge of being favored as opposed to worrying about, because I've seen a lot of athletes, and you probably know this better than I might, where they're winning, but they're the favorite, but they're not winning the way they're supposed to be winning. And then they collapse completely because to them, that's a loss because they're supposed to dominate the guy. It's almost as if the Bradys and the Jordans go, I dare you to even try to get that close, right?
Yeah. Then they're like, I'm willing to go to the depths of hell. Are you willing to swim there with me?
Yeah, right, exactly.
But you had said something right before you said that. You said something that triggered something in my mind. What did you just say right before that?
Process-based, process goals.
Process, yeah. How many times do we hear trust the process?
Yep, right.
All the time, okay? But what's the process, Tony? What's the process, Dr. Antonio? What's the process? Nobody knows. Right. Nobody knows. Like, how do you trust something that you can't grab?
Great point.
I trust it. I could see your degrees. You could see my rings. You see my trophies. Easy to trust my process because you see it, right? And when someone says, hey, trust the process, and they've lost a bunch or they're not doing well, what am I trusting? So to them, the process has always been go up early, work hard, listen to coach, do the extra. Well, I'm still losing. So What process is this, right? And, no offense, and I'm not going to name names, but, the motivational speakers of the world, like, they say things that light your soul on fire. But great example, man, everyone wants to be a lion, but nobody wants to hunt when lion's ready to hunt. Okay, coach, how do I hunt? That's the process.
That's a great point.
How do I hunt? The process is effort, attitude, preparation. Effort, attitude, aggressiveness, preparation, and fun. That's the process. And I can give you a checklist in every single sport to include MMA, wrestling, baseball, softball, what that looks like and what we can control. Brush that process, manage your emotional control, and here are the peak performance factors like weaponizing gratitude, becoming anti-fragile, being in alignment. You do those things, we can win all the big shit as long as you've got the talent and the effort. But yes, the best love the process, but nobody can just hear that and then do it. That's like, You guys live in South Florida. I'm in San Diego. That's like, I'm just going to start driving east and eventually I'll make it to the end of Florida. Shit, there's the Atlantic Ocean. Let me drive south.
Right.
Versus giving you a GPS. If you gave me a GPS, not only do I know where I'm going, I know how long it's going to be there. If I know where I could stop along the way, if I miss a turn, I can reroute. That's mindset training at the next level.
Fantastic. So you help define, schedule, systematically develop the successful process instead of, oh, I just go to practice and enjoy it. No.
Yeah. How many times have we been told, go out there and have fun all the time? How many of those athletes have stressed as hell? Everybody. How many of you have been told, don't worry about winning and losing? Everybody. How many of you worry about winning and losing? Everybody. So giving them skills as a foundation, just like, I'm sure, I don't know all the work that you guys do, and I'm not going to compare anything you do to CrossFit, but I'm just going to use CrossFit as the example. Okay.
Do not say CrossFit in our presence. I'm kidding.
I know. I'm going to use CrossFit as the example. Before you start going to class at a good gym, they're going to teach you how to properly Olympic lift. You can't just be like, hey, this is what a power clean looks like. Go do it, right? Like the good gyms over the years, or the good jiu-jitsu teams. Hey, listen, you got to go through the fundamentals class before you go in the competition class. So, you got to teach them those core set of skills, before they're ready to just jump in. And again, like I know a little about lifting weights, but like I know nothing compared to what you guys know on how to measure and analyze. Like I was a D1 athlete, and my experience ends there. I have no further formal training besides a TRX and a Bulgarian bag certification. That's it. I know shit besides that.
Both are pretty good, by the way.
I love both. So in San Diego is where Todd Durkin's gym is.
I know Todd, Fitness Quest 10, yeah.
Yeah.
Been
so
out there.
both those guys are former collegiate wrestlers that have helped our program a lot. I just went to dinner with one of those guys. Small world.
Yep. Great.
So, I have a question for you guys.
Go on.
If I could ask one. If you're going to talk about sports science on the physical side, what's the most important thing in a combat athlete? If we're going to really hone in on one or two things to measure in our training, in our physical training, if I'm going to give people any advice, or people who are listening and want advice, what would be two things that they need to measure that they're probably not measuring?
Well, I think the greater question is the accuracy in the devices that would be effective in doing such, because I struggle with this all the time. But they're the obvious ones, right? They really are. I mean, measuring training load in a sense of sympathetic, parasympathetic influence and, watching recovery. Okay, so what is the total training load and how is the body responding? Is it sympathetically becoming dominant to your earlier points about always being stressed? Or is it recovering effectively by looking? HRV could be one medium. Some biomarkers might be some, and of course, resting heart rate. So I would say looking at autonomic nervous system function would give us a reasonable indication as to whether or not the athlete is over a physical threshold. And then the second is the obvious, because you friggin' learn, really. You don't learn while you're doing something. You learn while you're sleeping. I mean, that's when those neural patterns are further, you got your neurons being built from a new skill that day. Well, they're being impacted, designed, developed, myelin sheath thickened and all that during rest itself. So I think the two biggest things to measure outside of the mental side, and we know that you won't have a mental side if you're not sleeping eventually. So it is the rest. I look more at the rest and the recovery capacity, and are they recovering before anything else? Because if they're not, inevitably the mood goes, they're skilled, they're practicing junk, they're fatigued, they can't do anything probably you would like them to do, concentrate, stay focused, and be process-based. That's my number 1 and 2. Are they resting, and is the load or the demand or the volume too great for them?
Yeah, and I think that's a great explanation. And in fact, the concept of training load doesn't apply just to MMA. It applies really to all sports. Yeah. I mean, probably the easiest sport to deal with training load would be, I call them the podium sports, the run, bike, swim sports, because you measure distance, you measure intensity, and it's fairly easy to handle the training load. And I think the part that a lot of coaches, I don't know if they ignore it, but maybe it's not as up in their minds, would be the issue of recovery, as Tony alluded to. The concept of sleep hygiene is certainly important. A lot of people are not fond of using dietary supplements. There's plenty of dietary supplements that will help you recover. So I think outside of the skill acquisition, obviously you have skill coaches in MMA or boxing or whatever. Outside of that, and if you're just dealing with training the athlete to be in shape for the sport, it's almost always figuring out the proper training load so that they could recover. I mean, in the endurance sports, a lot of it is you work out. I remember I worked with a world-class 1,500 meter runner. This was a couple decades ago. And she said, I don't have an easy workout. Every day is hard. We teeter on either getting injured or being at that point where I'm training so hard that when I compete, I'm going to be fast as hell. So in a way, that's how all sports are. You beat the crap out of them, but they got to recover and they can't get injured. So right. What that is, it's so individual that, you know, Mike, you've worked with so many athletes that you realize not everyone can handle the same load, and some people may need more recovery or whatnot.
It makes sense.
Yeah. And, you know, it's also, Mike, it's the things we can control. I can't control. I get this from a lot of strength, you know, performance coaches in MMA. Well, I feel they should be doing the conditioning more with me and not sparring as much. I get that, but you're not the skill coach. You don't run that. You're not, you know, I worked with Ray Longo for 11, 12 years. With Ray and I were like this and was blessed to do so, but I never did anything about talking to Ray first, asking him what he's doing, how much training, you know, so all we can do, Mike, is really control that and offer something like, if you were coaching your wrestling team, here's the markers we got. Here are the recovery markers. Here's how much sleep some of the guys are getting. He may not be getting enough. His resting heart rate's up. HRV is declining. Sympathetic activation seems high. And we just offer that to you, and potentially someone could adjust the practice maybe accordingly. But those are the only variables really we can control, because the skill coaches, right, I'm not going to go up to Kel Sanderson and tell him, hey, you're overtraining these guys, whether he is or not. You don't do that. So you just control what you can, you know?
Yeah, 100%. That makes sense. What's the best device that you guys recommend for people to measure all that stuff? Like, I know there's so many. The UFC uses certain ones. What do you recommend?
I know Dr. Tart has been pretty high, and she's a brilliant neuroscientist. And again, we're looking for trends. We're not perfect, right? It's a trend. Are 3 things that are supposed to be going up, going down? Are 4 things that are supposed to be going down, going up? The Aura Ring can be pretty good, actually. I know you know of that. The UFC has used it. I've used it. And I find it, again, relatively reliable regarding the trends. Identifying full sleep stages, I mean, you got to be hooked up to some heavy, real gear for that. Yeah. But nevertheless, it gives you some reasonable data on resting heart rate overnight. Respiratory rate will also have an influence. Will also be influenced by sympathetic activity, okay, whether we have sympathetic balance or not, heart rate. So those are some of the things, and we could talk in greater detail about that anytime you'd like, because I think what they will do is inevitably, if those markers are going all in the wrong direction, they're probably going to lead to decline mood. They're going to probably lead to decline motivation, and maybe neurobiologically a decline in mood. One of my
high-level jiu-jitsu athletes that competed at ADCC, she sent 2 things. So there's a group chat of 6 of us coaches. She sent 2 things every day: her physical stats, like her HRV and all that stuff. And then there's 7 questions that I have her answer every single day in the morning and at night. And so, like, all of the coaches were in communication. So, like, if she's having like a low couple of days, I'm texting her sports science lady and being like, hey man, like what's going on, man? If she's struggling in the workout, she's texting me being like, hey, she's not how she normally is. Like, what is she saying to you? Real. So I think it's great for everyone to communicate. I think that's also something that a lot of teams don't do a great job of. It's kind of like, hey, everybody stay in your lane unless there's an issue.
Right. Well, you have the team experience. You would know best. I concede I haven't worked, working at the team level it's not easy. So, yeah. But those are some of the things we look at, and I think they are directly related to mental performance. They're an indicator. Usually what we'll see as we'll close it up is, if HRV is starting to decline, and the effects are a little bit delayed, but again, HRV is not the only variable, but it's an indication of multiple systems potentially. And we may see inevitably performance, energy levels, focus, attention, and just peripheral capacity decline. So those are the things we look at. And marrying those with what you do, it's unstoppable. It's fantastic.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, gentlemen, this has been a great conversation. Mike,
awesome.
To be respectful of your time. Before we sign off, could you tell everyone where people could find information about you. If you're going to be in Florida by chance, I don't know if you give seminars here, just to let people know where they could, get more info on you.
Well, as far as where I'm going to be, I took 62 flights last year, so I'll be everywhere. Just
get the SoFlo
along. Yeah, like follow along and just ask me where I'm going to be. But probably the easiest way to get in touch with me is on Instagram, mindset_Mike. Our company's page, our main page is Wrestling Mindset. If you have any interest in mindset training or working with me, DM me directly, just because we have a lot of people that manage the Wrestling Mindset page. And again, remember, this is not just about wrestling. Our parent company is Winning Mindset, and it's baseball mindset, soccer mindset, lacrosse mindset, martial arts mindset. So any athlete that's listening, or any team, or any coach that's interested, or you want me to speak at a seminar for you, just DM me. There's probably a time that I'll be coming to your area soon, and if not, we could definitely arrange it. So I just want to say thank you again for you guys for reaching out. Sorry for the back and forth getting here. It was the busiest time of my year the last couple of weeks. So glad we were able to do it, and I hope we get to do a round 2 where we can kind of deep dive into some more stuff.
There's too much to talk about that we haven't. We got to do a round 2, Mike.
Absolutely.
We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike, and enjoy the rest of the day.